But when I read Book of Why, that sort of changed things for me. Science is the amalgamation of theories that have survived rigorous falsification. Sometimes you do want to stop. You do want to be derailed because you really are headed in a wrong direction. One common theme that I've had in my life is certain times in my life, I thought I was amazing at something, whatever it is, and turns out I'm really bad at it, and that kind of woke me up. I won't stop until...
Hey, Causal Bandits. Welcome to the Causal Bandits podcast, the best podcast on causality and machine learning on the internet.
Today we're traveling back to Los Angeles to meet our guest. During his high school years, he was a pretty damn good tennis player. But his love for computers was stronger than his love of tennis. After college, he rejected an offer from a big tech company to join a startup. Later on, he founded a successful business, but he quit it to devote his full attention to studying causality. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mr. Scott Mueller. Let me pass it to your host, Alex Molak.
Welcome to the podcast, Scott.
Thank you.
How are you today?
I'm good. How are you?
Very good. The weather is sweet today. Konrad Lorenz, who is considered the founding father of ethology, looking and examining animal behavior, once said that thinking is acting is in imaginary space. Majority of your current work is work about counterfactual thinking, a so-called rank 3 of Pearlian ladder of causation. When you think about this quote in your work, what are your thoughts?
Oh, it's a great quote. I heard it for the first time recently in Bernard Skolkoff's keynote presentation at Clear. I love it because on one hand, the quote speaks to how we estimate counterfactual probabilities and estimands because we are imagining hypothetical worlds, and we're building causal models for those worlds. Of course, we can't really experience those worlds, run experiments in those worlds, act in those worlds, but we can estimate things that are happening in those worlds based on what's happening in our world. So from that perspective, it's a great quote. But also the more philosophical or metaphysical ideas behind it of when we think about something, we are running that through in our minds in this imagined space that we're performing those actions, no matter how strange or outside of reality those scenarios are. In a way, it sort of bridges, the causal models that I think about frequently for counterfactual reasoning and our everyday thoughts, how we think about things.
What are the main challenges that you face in your work today?
My work today is the direction of my research is on being able to make better decisions at an individual level, but also at the level of having policies that are effective for a large population. But making better decisions based on counterfactual reasoning. And counterfactual reasoning hits upon this fundamental problem of causal inference, where we can't observe the outcomes for two different treatments. And so we can't have somebody take a medicine and then go back in time and then have them not take the medicine and see what's happening. At an individual level, we can't do that. Of course, we can't do that really at a population level, but we can estimate that in a pretty straightforward way at a population level and get those averages. The problem with this fundamental problem of causal inference is that makes it difficult to get point estimates or identify these probabilities. A while ago, Jin Tian and Judea Pearl came up with these bounds on probabilities of causation, particular counterfactual probabilities that are interesting: probability of necessity, probability of sufficiency, and the probability of necessity and sufficiency. And there's some others that are pretty interesting as well. Those bounds, even though they were proven tight, meaning we can't do any better than those bounds mathematically, we can never do any better. without further assumptions, those bounds are often too loose to base some decisions off of, too loose to be useful. And so the challenge is, how do we narrow those bounds? Ideally, we narrow them so much they become identified or point identified. But at least if we can narrow them down sometimes to a sufficient degree, that allows us to understand underlying data generating processes better, or make better decisions. And so that's the challenge. Now, I can't do any better than what they've done. They've proven that, but we can think about what additional assumptions we can make that would allow us to identify these counterfactual probabilities or narrow those bounds significantly. And so, there are a lot of assumptions you can make to do that, but which assumptions are most reasonable and which assumptions make sense for a particular scenario?
Mm-hmm. In one of your papers, you have shown that if we can afford to make so-called the monotonicity assumption, this can be very helpful. Sure. Can you share with our audience what this assumption is?
Basically, monotonicity says that there's no possibility of harm, and harm in the counterfactual sense. So as a concrete example, or semi-concrete example, you can take some medicine and hopefully you get better from your illness. Harm would be that if you take the medicine, that some toxic element of the medicine prevents you from getting better. But if you had not taken the medicine, you would have gotten better on your own. Your own immune system would have taken care of the illness.
There's a negative counterfactual effect.
Yes, at an individual level.
At an individual level.
Right. And if the probability of that happening is zero, if that's not possible, then for certain scenarios that just definitionally is impossible. For other scenarios, we may know the underlying biological mechanisms of this medicine, and we know that this can't happen. Then we have monotonicity, and once you have monotonicity, you can do a lot of other things. Particularly, you can point identify probability of benefit, probability of harm. Well, probability of harm is zero, but other counterfactual probabilities of that nature, probability of necessity, probability of sufficiency.
What is the main challenge you think that causes those methods not to be applied in practice more broadly today?
The methods of assuming monotonicity and then identifying these?
Yeah, identifying counterfactual quantities, yeah.
Well, I think, so for one, how do you know you have maybe you don't have monotonicity, and so assuming that would be a problem because you're going to get skewed results. Number two, maybe you do have monotonicity, but how do you know? And this is the subject of a paper I'm working on now. I presented it at Rand Institute held a conference, so I presented part of that paper, but I've been improving that paper and I'm almost done with it, along with Judea Pearl. And we show how you sometimes you can, from the data, show that you do have monotonicity. That's pretty rare to be able to show that you do have monotonicity from the data alone. But what is much more feasible is sometimes you can show from the data that you definitely do not have monotonicity.
Mm-hmm. So there is a relatively good test that we can use in order to say for sure we don't have monotonicity. Right. And there's a weaker test that can tell us that we have monotonicity, but it's only in a subset of conditions.
Yes. Yeah. So it's in very particular situations that it'll be pretty rare to apply. You can confirm that you have monotonicity, but disproving it is certainly a lot easier. As we all know, in general, disproving things in science is far easier. And then further, we say, okay, maybe you don't have monotonicity, but how much is it violated? And so we write about what are the limits to monotonicity in your particular situation. And then even though we might not be able to identify the counterfactual probabilities, we can narrow those bounds further because we know there's a limit to the violation of monotonicity.
Mm-hmm. So it's like putting a bound on the bound.
Yeah.
Is that correct?
Yes, putting a bound on monotonicity, which puts a bound
on the probability.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I always love, all those ideas, all those creative ideas that we produce in the causal community, because here we are basically on the verge of human knowledge in a sense.
Yeah.
And everything that we can apply to, I wanted to say verify, but actually I should say falsify those models, is the same set of tools that we have in science in general. Mm-hmm. So in this sense, causality or causal modeling could be nicknamed scientific modeling, and
I agree.
It's basically the same thing.
Yeah. I mean, so often in science, we're asking that question of what caused this, and what are we looking at? What are the consequences of this? What are the effects of the causes and the causes of the effects?
There's another quote that you shared with me before we met for the recording today, mm-hmm. that comes from Marcos Lopez de Prado, mm-hmm. who works in finance. Would you like to share this quote as well?
Yeah. So I read it in his book, Causal Factor Investing book. I think he quoted it from somebody else. I don't know who the original. I didn't pay attention to who the original author of that quote was, but it's that science is the amalgamation of theories that have survived rigorous falsification. Yeah, I love that. We had a discussion about it before, but I love the simplicity of that statement, what science boils down to. And, when you think how amazing the world is we live in now because of all of the scientific advancements so many great people before us came up with throughout the centuries, and in modern times it just is accelerating. It's just amazing. And so where is all this knowledge coming from? How do we know it's really true? And we think, oh, well, there's been all these experiments, and we've mathematically shown various things to be the case, and we've proven this and not proven that, and all that. But really, it's very, very hard in science to prove things. It's much easier to disprove things, and so our knowledge mostly is based on all of these theories that we've come up with that we've tried to disprove, but they have survived. And if they have survived all that, all the attention to try to disprove them, then our confidence raises on what's really going on in the universe.
It's really great. This aspect of survival mm-hmm. also brings to my mind, this evolutionary dynamics mm-hmm. that we have in science. And when I was listening to you now, I just recalled one of my conversations with a person that applies causality in practice. Mm-hmm. And when I was talking with them about model evaluation, mm-hmm. They told me like, hey, we start with something, mm-hmm. Then we check the consequences of this model, like predictions of this model against reality. Maybe we do some intervention. Mm-hmm. We see if the model is generating the data that is similar to what we get from the intervention. Mm-hmm. And so this is also, this iterative process is basically an evolutionary process. Mm-hmm. And I heard very similar things from other practitioners. And I also use the same approach, like an iterative approach in work with my clients. What do you think we could do in order to make your findings from your work more accessible to practitioners today?
Yeah, great question. Because that's ultimately what I hope. I hope that I'm able to contribute value to people, and if I just write papers that nobody reads, then that's not. Then I haven't really done anything. Even if I'm lucky enough to have some valuable content there, or some valuable discoveries.
I know at least 3 people who are reading your papers.
Okay.
Yeah,
that's great.
But I think that's just a very small subset of people who are reading your papers.
I'm eager to provide value to this amazing world that we are living in modern times. Any which way I can, I'm excited about that. So first, I have to actually do something valuable, and then I have to have people actually use it and benefit from it. So aside from publishing and going to conferences and speaking and that kind of thing, there's and my background is actually software development and computer science. So I hope to develop some applications and software frameworks, contribute to projects like DoWhy, which I've recently talked with, thanks to you. Recently talked with some of the folks over there. I'll be adding to their open source library some of the theorems and formulas that I've come up with.
That's really great to hear. I'm super excited about this, and I think there's a lot of great theoretical work in causality, and I think that's a great opportunity today to start translating this work into convenient software packages that people can easily use.
Yep.
So something that has an API that looks familiar. Like I think DoWhy is doing an excellent job with this, using a very similar approach to what scikit-learn does for general machine learning, building like a consistent API for different models, different approaches, and so on and so on. So that makes it easier for people who don't necessarily have time to implement something from scratch, right? Or to go through, 10 different libraries. It makes it easier for them to apply this. And it increases the probability that they can actually make this stuff running in production.
I think, so that's part of it. That would be amazing. If and I know I know that's a popular project, and I think it's growing in popularity. And I think you're right that DoWhy may be the scikit-learn of causal inference, and so that benefits software developers. It's a Python framework, but I also hope that some software developers will use that as a base for even more general approaches to things. So maybe building a nice GUI on top of it, where you can be an expert in a particular field in econometrics or biology or something else, and you don't need to be an expert in software development or in some aspects of causal inference, yet still make use of this at an even higher level.
What you mean is like building interfaces that are accessible to people who maybe don't necessarily code, but they have domain expertise that they could use.
So the interfaces could be, drag and drop, click here and that kind of thing, or it could be an integration into an existing. I don't know too much about econometrics or some of the other fields that are maybe epidemiologists. I don't know. Do epidemiologists have this nice software package that allows them to model things? But maybe it's an integration. If they do, maybe it's an integration into some popular software package. So they sort of get it for free.
Yeah, I think there are many different fields. I mean, we have people in marketing.
Yeah, marketing is
vividly interested in causal inference, and not all of them have expertise to code themselves.
Right. So marketing. I did a lot of internet marketing when I was doing internet businesses, and I had. I was not a marketing expert. And I worked with some marketing experts, and I tried to learn. And one popular thing that pretty much every internet marketing software package has, and even built into something like Google AdWords, is A/B testing. Some of the work that I've done, and some of the work that other colleagues of mine have done. Ang Lee did this. He started this great framework for unit selection. Is really valuable to marketers, and it becomes clear that A/B testing, the way there's a huge industry around where you have multiple different kinds of ads that can go out to the same target audience, and it can split randomly who gets to see which ad, and then from there you get to understand as the campaign is running which is better performing on average, that can be severely suboptimal. And this is a core thing that's built into so many marketing platforms. But with something like Do-I and with some of the work that myself and other colleagues have worked on, if that can be integrated into these marketing platforms, they can sort of get a lot of this for free. Maybe they can specify, so the unit selection framework is such that you may specify certain extra attributes that you don't need to specify with A/B testing. What is the value to you of advertising to somebody who will respond favorably to your ad? What is the negative value to you for advertising to somebody who would be sort of harmed by the ad, in the sense that they will not buy your product if they see your ad, but they would buy your product if they don't see your ad. And so you might have to update the interface a little bit, but essentially you get a lot of this counterfactual reasoning you can for low cost cognitively.
Scott, for those people in our audience who are not familiar with the unit selection framework, could you give us a short definition?
The unit selection framework was created by Ang Lee and Judea Pearl. Ang Lee was a PhD student of Judea's and is now a professor at Florida State University. And he wrote this great paper on unit selection that allows you to specify the weight or value you would place on 4 different types of responders. And we can talk about this in terms of a marketing example. And so the treatment is that you show somebody an ad, and the response is they buy your product. And so the 4 different responders are, first, a complier. That means that if you show them an ad, they will buy the product. However, that same person, if you don't show them the ad, they will not buy your product. And then there's the always taker, who will buy your product whether or not you show them the ad. Never taker, they will not buy your product whether or not you show them the ad. And then there's the one you really don't want to advertise to, which is the defier. And if you don't show them the ad, they're going to buy your product because they need it or because they want it and they know about it. But if you show them your ad, they are not going to buy your product. Maybe the ad is offensive to them, or maybe it reminds them of something, and maybe it allows them to think about it more and wonder if there's a better option. For whatever reason, the defier is the one that you will turn away from showing the ad. So you have these 4 response types, and you place a value on each one. Clearly, you want to advertise to the compliers. Those are the ones that will be effective for your advertisement. And although the never takers and the always takers, it's okay to advertise to them because it doesn't really matter whether or not you advertise to them in general. I mean, it may, and this is a separate, this is sort of some of the extensions to this framework that I and Ang Lee and others have come up with. In general, it doesn't matter, but it might matter a little bit because the advertisement costs money. Maybe there's a fee for each email sent out, or maybe there's a physical package you send as part of the promotion. Maybe it's a discount. And so they would have a negative value, or at best a 0 value, typically. And then the defier might have a pretty strong negative value.
Yeah.
The defier might have a more negative value than a complier has a positive value. And there's where the nuances of your particular scenario or your particular business come into play. How much do you value these, and how does that play into your strategy? What he showed and what we would later write papers together on and individually is that the typical way for advertising, continuing on this example, the typical way that we know how to advertise better is through A/B testing. What messages work and don't work. We send out 2 messages or 2 advertisements or 2 packages or whatever the advertisement is to the same group, but we randomly pick who gets which treatment.
Yeah.
It might not be 2, it might be 5 or 10 or whatever. And so we send out multiple advertisements, and from there it's sort of like a randomized controlled trial. And so we can see who's getting better. And there's optimization techniques for, okay, But in this particular batch of advertisements and this target demographic or target web pages or emails or physical addresses, you want to send out most of the advertisements of the one that has shown to be on average most conducive to sales or products sold. But that can be severely suboptimal for your particular scenario or business or strategy. And that's shown in these papers, using this approach to unit selection. And it's pretty easy to apply the unit selection, even though it's based on counterfactual reasoning and counterfactual probabilities. These response types, they're all individual level of treatment effects. And we know that, you can't identify those. But if you plug in observational data and hopefully the combined experimental data, maybe you only have experimental data, so you can plug in only experimental data too. We can give you bounds on these the overall value. Mm-hmm. So, maybe advertising to this particular set of units or subpopulation gives you a value of between negative $20 and positive $20. And then it's like, okay, well, I don't know. But advertising to this other subpopulation gives you a value of between $30 and $35 positive. So that's good. So choose the second one.
That's sufficient to make a better decision.
Yes.
Scott, you started with computer science, mm-hmm. then you moved to business, and then you decided to go and study causal inference. What's the unifying thread or unifying perspective for you over all of those years and those experiences?
Great question. And I certainly didn't have a unifying strategy in my mind of how my life was going to unfold from college on. In college, I studied computer science as an undergraduate, also as for my master's and PhD, but that came later. But at that time, I finished with a bachelor's degree in computer science, and I loved it. I loved computer science. I loved the mathematical nature of it. Of course, as you're learning computer science in college, there is some programming that you learn as well. And I loved the programming. I loved creating things. And, when I graduated, there was a thought in my mind of, should I stay and get a master's degree or a PhD or something in academia, or go into the workforce. And for me, the tech world was really exciting. I had friends that were doing very well in the tech world, and they were convincing me to join them in various companies or start new things. And so that thought of staying in school had very low preference or priority. So I went into the tech world as a software developer, and those were really exciting times for me. The prospect of a lot of people using my software, of making a lot of money, of doing important things, all that, and the whole excitement of the industry was intoxicating for me. Eventually, I wanted to start my own companies, and one in particular, which led to a series of other startups that I founded or co-founded or joined very early on. So that brought me from software development into more of a business type mindset, and less actual hands-on software development. Though I never quite lost that. I love it. I love software development even to this day. I do very little software development now, really a small amount, but to me that's fun. I was a TA for a professor, and a really phenomenal professor at UCLA, and he still does software development, and he talks about it as therapeutic for him, and I can completely see that. For me, if there's an option Saturday night, go out to the movies or hang out with friends, or go to the beach during the day or whatever, or sit in my room and develop software. Sitting in my room developing software is a lot more fun. So
even in California,
yeah, wherever, right? California has great beaches and all that, but that pales in comparison in my mind, to the fun that can be had. creating something that never existed before through code. So then I started a company. That first company ended up not working out, but I have just great memories of it. We raised some money for it. We built it up to 50 employees about at its peak, and then at the end had to let them go parts at a time until we had none left. But and then I went through a series of companies, but even the failures, of course, the successes were really, really fun. Now I'm making actual money, and that was, the money, of course, is exciting because I want to have a life that I don't have to worry about money, number one, but also have the luxuries and of life that money entails. And here I'm starting to do that, and so that's really exciting. But even the failures, I just have really great memories of trying to build something great with people that you become very close with. That whole experience was wonderful. Maybe in my mind, maybe my brain is not remembering the bad times so much, or placing low emphasis on that, and so I only remember mostly the good times. All along, I always had this sort of deep hidden desire to go back to school, because I think, even as exciting as tech was, the tech business, the tech world, and even as much as I enjoyed kind of the practical nature of software development, in my mind, I felt like my brain is less well suited for that, and more well suited for the kind of more mathematical, academic type of thinking that's part of computer science. I think I always had this desire sort of nagging at me to go back to school, and while I was at my previous company prior to going back to school, UCode, I loved it. I was teaching. We were teaching, not me. The company that I created was formed to teach kids computer science, and we had the opportunity for some kids to go really, really deep in the computer science, and I loved it on many levels. While I was there, still around today, but while I was there, we taught over 10,000 kids, and we made some pretty big impacts on their lives. So that was a very fulfilling company in many ways. But at the same time, while I was at that company, AI had really started to have an impact in the world, had an impact on companies. People started to become much more interested in it because it was showing, it was becoming obvious how useful it was. And for me, that was super exciting because, of the dream to get to artificial general intelligence, the super intelligence, the human level AI. That to me that's going to change the world. Even if we can get close to that, clone 1 trillion copies. I mean, there are practical limitations, and so that's not necessarily going to be the case. But you can imagine clone 1 trillion copies of this almost human AI. In some ways, far surpassing human capabilities. In some ways, not quite there, but close. And then, hey, you guys, you trillion AIs, AI people, agents, go work on cancer, or go work on this particular problem we have in the world, and solve it. And so those dreams, those ideas were too much for me to not want to do something about, not want to be part of, not want to hopefully contribute to. And so there it became, okay, I always thought about going back to school. I always felt like one day I need to get my PhD or at least master's degree. And I think my brain is better suited to that, even though I had some success in tech, and even though I did, the practical software development was fun for me, I still felt like I belong maybe more in an academic environment or research environment. And so I I went back to school for AI. But during the process, actually, when I was applying to schools, applying to graduate programs, I came across Book of Why. I went on Amazon and I thought, okay, AI is super exciting, and the ideas of what AI could do, I was constantly dreaming about that, thinking about it, but I didn't know how to contribute to it, or even I didn't contribute to it even way before that. I didn't even know. I knew I'd gone through the TensorFlow tutorial online, not a whole lot beyond that. So I didn't know the details at all. So I went on Amazon, I bought a ton of books on everything related to AI at a very high level, and some at a deeper level. And my plan was just go deeper and deeper, and figure out where I want my expertise to be headed towards. But as part of that, one of the books that I bought was Book of Why by Judea Pearl. And that really caught my attention. I started reading that, I bought the book. I think I had been accepted to USC, and I had committed. I had paid the deposit or whatever, and for the first classes had not started yet, though. This was just post-COVID, so there was some figuring out of how they're going to do the classes online and that kind of thing anyway. But when I read Book of Why, that sort of changed things for me. I just thought this will go back to you asked about a common theme of software development, business, and going back to school. One common theme that I've had in my life is certain times in my life, I thought I was amazing at something, whatever it is, and turns out I'm really bad at it, and that kind of woke me up and in various times in my life, and made me think, oh wow, this is a surprise. Here I was with an ego about this particular thing, and that was a totally unwarranted confidence that I had. And my life would change around that. And here was an instance where I thought I was good at, sort of the business statistics, the high level statistics, looking at data and coming to some good conclusions about it, interpreting it well. And I read Book of Why, and I just realized I am really a novice at that. And there's no question I have made poor decisions in the past based on data when I thought I had made great decisions. That was sort of not only surprising to me and made me think, this is something I cannot go further in my life without knowing better. But also I felt that this was sort of fundamental to human reasoning, human thinking, thinking causally, thinking counterfactually, and we know that even as babies, there have been experiments on this. I think Daniel Kahneman wrote in Thinking Fast and Slow these experiments with these toddlers. You remove a brick or a block at the bottom. They expect it to fall, but you remove a block, but the other blocks have been glued together, and they don't fall. The baby's recognizes.
Surprised.
Yeah. And if we want to get to human level AI, to me, in my mind, this was a core thing that we had to bake in to our machine learning models or architectures.
What do you think we are missing the most today in the approach to modeling in order to move forward towards this vision of you said like generally intelligent agents?
Yeah, AGI, super intelligence, the much smarter AIs than we have today to solve really significant problems. I don't want to say too much because my focus has been now on causality and causal inference, not on AI. So although I've certainly played with ChatGPT and LLMs and various other machine learning architectures and AI models, symbolic too, but just played with them. I know there are some people that think that we just need to increase increase the size of these models, the number of parameters, and some architectural tweaks, and we will get there. That these properties will emerge, that causality will emerge, and I haven't seen that. But what do I know? Maybe that will happen. I know the idea of predicting the next word, although that sounds very primitive and basic. The idea is, well, we're taking the whole universe into account, and so eventually these models will take the whole universe into account in such a way that there's very powerful reasoning going on. I haven't seen any of that yet. My feeling is still that causality, the mathematics and the science behind causality that we as humans throughout this century and even previous centuries that have done work on this, that needs to be baked in to these architectures. That was my thought very early getting into causality. That thought remains until I see otherwise. Mm-hmm. I'm pretty excited about going in that direction. Right now I've been developing or trying to develop my expertise in causal inference. And then the hope is that I can apply that to these architectures. Mm-hmm. I know some work is already going on in that vein.
What are you working on currently now?
The general direction of my research is on better decision making, personalized decision making, policy-based decision making, any kind of decision making, because that fundamentally it has to do with these counterfactual estimates, counterfactual probabilities, reasoning, and the problem with this counterfactual reasoning is it's at that fundamental problem of causal inference that we cannot observe different outcomes for different treatments at the individual level. We can't give you a medicine and then see if you get better from your illness, go back in time, not give you the medicine, and see what happens. We can do that at a population level, at an average. We can estimate that. We can do these randomized clinical trials, controlled trials. We can do that kind of thing, but because of this fundamental problem of causal inference, often we cannot identify these counterfactual estimates of probabilities.
Yes.
And because of that, we're limited on some of the decision making we could do that would be more optimal than we can do without it. And so a lot of my research is figuring out how can we identify these counterfactual probabilities, and if we can't identify it, how can we get bounds that are narrow enough for us to make good decisions off of.
Scott, what are one or two things that you learned while running your business or your businesses that help you today when you work with causality and you think about causality?
Yeah, so I can't say that there was anything I learned in business that applies directly to, coming up with theorems or mathematical formula for computing counterfactual probabilities, anything like that. But what I can say is that there were many decisions, some of which were important in business. And I thought I had made very good decisions based on the information that was available to me at that time. It was the exciting thing for me when I read, exciting and disheartening in some way, when I read Book of Why, that I realized that I was not interpreting data always properly, that I was not, that there's no way I always made good decisions based on that data, on the data that I had or the information that I had of the scenario. And so now when I think about counterfactual probabilities in particular, where I'm trying to come up with reasonable assumptions that somebody could make about a scenario that would allow me to narrow the bounds on probabilities of causation or identify counterfactual probabilities, I think some sense of what a reasonable assumption is I can look at some scenario and think, oh, yeah, that assumption I could make in certain situations in business, and wow, that would have really helped. Or I could have made a great, I could have made a great assessment and analysis of the situation and done things, taken actions, made decisions that would have really benefited the business. So there's a bit of a motivation, excitement in that, but also hopefully some value that gives me in coming up with assumptions that are more useful to others.
Who would you like to thank?
Well, I think I've been very fortunate in my life that there have been many people that have had a huge positive influence on my life, that have really just given me so much value. So I'm going to limit this to not including any of my family because I'll be here for a while and bore you and bore anybody listening. And to just people that have, maybe two people that are coming to my mind right now, that have been just a huge mentor, role model, positive influence on my education, and my the development of my growing expertise. Number one, of course, is Judea Pearl, my PhD advisor. I cannot believe even right now how lucky I am that I know him, that I get to work with him, that he is a mentor to me. I feel like Judea is going to go down in history as one of the great minds at the level of Isaac Newton, Albert Einstein. I think already he's certainly in some circles, people have that level of respect and reverence towards him. But I think that'll grow as some of the foundational things that he's done in his life scientifically become a bigger and bigger part of the future of science and especially AI. But aside from that, he is just such an amazing human being. Everything that he has gone through in his life, and every phone call, every visit, every meeting that I have with him, it is not just learning, some of that incredible thinking and knowledge that he has. It's and you've got to know him a tiny bit. He's an extremely entertaining individual. There are a lot of things I want to say right now, but I feel like I'm gonna bore you and others by extending this to be quite lengthy. He's just an incredible human being, and so I absolutely cannot thank him enough for the time he has given me. There's one other guy, Klaus Schauser. He was a computer science professor of mine when I got my in my undergraduate days, which were now quite a while ago. He invited me out to lunch, not just me, invited anybody who wanted to come out to lunch. I remember during his class, he was starting a company, and he was just entrepreneurial, and he was into the growing tech world, and he just wanted to talk to us. I don't know if many other people showed up, but I got to have like a one-on-one meeting with him, and we developed a friendship, a relationship. But I have kept in touch with him over the years. He would end up investing in two of my businesses, and he became extraordinarily successful. He founded a company, Go to My PC, which was bought by Citrix, and he founded Appfolio, which has done extraordinarily well. He's been extremely successful, and this is another just incredible human being. I can't thank him enough for the the time, the resources he's given me, the introductions he's given me. I mean, he's just done so much for me. That has been quite a rewarding relationship that I've had, and the mentoring he's done for me. I don't want to go off on too many tangents, but I do want to say this one thing with Klaus. One of my early startups that I had. He was an investor in, and he was the first investor and a co-founder really with me. And I would get pretty excited. I was young, and I was, thinking certain ideas I had were just gold, and they were gonna be momentous. And he would say, well, yeah, that sounds good. That's a great hypothesis. And I would think, well, what do you mean hypothesis? This this is this is going to be great. And we read an article together. The article had talked about irrational exuberance, and that a lot of these very successful tech entrepreneurs were irrationally exuberant about their ideas. And he would remind me that I'm being irrationally exuberant, but that's okay. You need to be irrationally exuberant to succeed sometimes. And that can be a positive quality. There are going to be tough times. You need to be motivated and passionate enough that's not going to deter you or derail you. And you need to have that passion as you grow the company, and as other people need to have that same vision that you have. But a lot of great lessons he has given me. A lot of thanks to both Klaus and Judea.
What would be your advice for people who are just starting in something that is challenging or complex? Maybe people who want to enter causality, or general machine learning, or people who want to start their own company in tech or outside it. What would be your advice for them to keep going when they meet all those challenges on their way, to be let it be intellectual challenges or business challenges?
I've been given a lot of great advice, and I feel like I have knowledge, but I don't know that I have a lot of value to give to somebody else in this respect, because sometimes you do want to stop, you do want to be derailed, because you really are headed in a wrong direction, and you certainly have to know when that's the case versus no, you need to stick through this, and this is just a speed bump, and the great things will await you if you persevere. I can't make that judgment for anybody else. I can say that in business, this is an example of the kinds of decisions that you need to make. Whether to push forward, whether to pivot, whether to make a tiny pivot, whether to reimagine your whole business or exit entirely. These are big decisions, and decision making is an area that's really interesting to me, especially decisions that are benefited from counterfactual analysis. So my advice, if somebody's how do you push through, or what do you do in the face of obstacles in business? That's a decision that you need to make. And my advice for decision making, learn counterfactual analysis, and hopefully, there are other researchers that are writing interesting books and papers on the subject, and read them. Hopefully, I can contribute to this growing body of knowledge, and you can read my stuff. As in academia, I think things maybe are a little different. I mean, clearly it's the same in the sense of, sometimes you are struggling with an idea, but that's not a good idea, or that's not a good path to solve this problem. And you need to recognize that and stop struggling and do something else. But I guess, maybe it's a little different from business in that those can be really great opportunities. These hard problems are the kinds of problems that are very interesting to solve, especially the high impact, hard problems. For me personally, that's pretty exciting. Not that I have, superpowers to solve problems, but that's fun. These are the puzzles.
What keeps you going when you encounter something like this on your way?
I don't know. I have a good answer because it's not that I tell myself, oh, Scott, you've got to have conviction. This looks like too hard of a problem, but no, you got to persevere anyway. I'll say a couple things about this. I don't know that I've ever had that situation where the problem is too hard. Maybe because my ego won't tell me that hey, you're not capable of solving this, or maybe it's because I haven't taken on too hard of a problem, and so even I certainly have problems, and I'm working on things right now which the solution is not evident yet, but I believe the solution is there, and so if I believe a solution is there, my mind is I got to find it, and I'm the way my brain works, and maybe why it wasn't as good for business, despite some successes, and maybe it's better for academia, is I won't stop until I find it, or until I recognize, like, okay, it seemed like it was evident, but no, I've spent a lot of time on this, and either it's not possible, or I'm not the man to find it. I think I try to find problems that I feel confident I can solve.
Mm-hmm.
I don't really have a discipline or a recipe for sticking with problems that are too hard, either because I just haven't allowed myself to pursue those kinds of problems. I look for problems that I can solve.
Mm-hmm.
Or Judeo call me up and say, hey, what do you think about this? And I'm like, oh yeah, I think I can do that.
Where can people find out more about you and your work?
I should have a website. I don't, though. Had you think in my former life and in tech, I particularly should have a website. Well, Judeo has a website, and on that he lists his papers, and most of my papers have been with him as a co-author, and so you'll find my work on Judeo's website at UCLA. But now you made me think I really should have a website. I'm gonna make one.
You're also on Twitter, right?
Yes. Oh, yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't post a whole lot, but I do enjoy the academic side of Twitter.
Great. Scott, it was a pleasure. Thank you so much.
It was my pleasure.